Hello, and welcome to Williams Mullen's Trending Now, an IP podcast, a legal podcast focused on providing innovative companies and investors with important and timely information concerning intangible assets such as patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. I am your host, Craig Mytelka, a partner in the IP section, and today I'll be joined by my partner and colleague, Amy Pruett, a partner also in our intellectual property practice group here at Williams Mullen, to discuss understanding and economizing NFTs and creative content. Amy, how are you doing today?
Oh, doing all right. Running around with kids, going to swim lessons on the summer, and lots of fun balancing.
Yep, it's it's good to be in the summertime. I'm sort of looking forward to spending more time outside. It was interesting before we started today. We just had a discussion about what the current status of NFTs are. And as we discussed, there was so much news coming out on NFTs and new and innovative uses of them, unbelievable record prices for various sales of tokens, and issues of environmental impact of tokens, that it is a really challenging and changing impact. And with that, Amy, it seems like overnight, non-fungible tokens have exploded into the marketplace as a unique means to exploit and trade content. Many of our clients have been asking us about not only how do they work, but what exactly is an NFT or non-fungible token, and how could they make use of them in their business. And so I guess maybe some background information might be helpful to acclimate our clients to the current environment.
Sure, absolutely. I know it's become a hot topic in a lot of industries, and especially in the music industry, where I've represented a lot of clients, and I've been to a recent music conference where it's kind of the topic of the day. But essentially, a non-fungible token is a unit of data on that's stored on blockchain, and it's created to transfer ownership either of physical things that are represented by that NFT or digital media. When they're minted or created, they're listed on an NFT marketplace, such as today we have OpenSea, Rarible, Foundation, and these are forms where NFTs can be sold and traded, whatever they're allowed to do according to the smart contracts that are associated with them. So the smart contracts essentially govern the transfer of those NFTs from one party to another. And their transaction history is stored on the blockchain so they can function as investments, and they store value, which ideally will increase over time. So that's one of the topics that comes up a lot, is what is the value of these NFTs?
Well, most of the public has heard about NFTs, and it's mostly in the form of, it started with cryptocurrency and things such as Bitcoin and so forth. What's the difference when you look at cryptocurrency with some of these tokens that you're now speaking of in terms in the music and art and other collectibles world?
Sure. NFTs use essentially the same type of programming as cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin and others. But Bitcoin and physical money, for example, are considered fungible, which means that they can be traded and exchanged for the same value. So one for another. So $1 equals $1, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. That's different than NFTs in that NFTs have a unique identifying code. So they're typically associated with a very limited supply, and the value isn't one for another. One NFT could be more valuable than another NFT. So they each have a digital signature and can only have one owner at a time. And that makes it impossible for an NFT to be exchanged for another one for the very same value. So this makes NFTs a scarcity, so that their value is essentially higher. And in fact, the market for NFTs in 2021 alone was about $41 billion.
And so what's the digital or physical assets that are typically associated with an NFT? It seems to me that when people are looking at NFTs, it's sort of a rehash of what's been done in the physical world now online. Is that correct? Or do you believe that there's more to it? And how would you differentiate those?
To a degree, there is some association with those physical products and physical things, but the difference is that there's a digital media file associated with it. So NFTs have been around essentially since 2014, and were one of the first big ways that they were used was to buy and sell digital artwork. And in other words, this would mean the NFT would be created or minted from a digital object that represented a tangible and possibly an intangible piece of artwork that could demand a high sale price. A famous digital artist known as Beeple actually created a composite of 5,000 drawings for the NFT known as Every Days, the first 5,000 days, and that sold at Christie's for $69.3 million. So that kind of put NFTs on the platform and in the public eye as something that could demand a really high price. Other types of content that an NFT can include are videos, sports highlights, collectibles, virtual avatars, designer sneakers and handbags, and music. In fact, the first tweet of Twitter's co-founder, Jack Dorsey, was sold as an NFT for $29 million. And we were just talking beforehand about one of the other NFTs now being used for service of process. Is that right?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, I think that NFTs are really, in many ways, still in their infancy. And the ultimate utility of these things is going to go far beyond what we currently see. In fact, we were just discussing before this podcast, 4 days ago, a court in New York allowed a service of process through an NFT. Given the unique qualities and record keeping that are associated with NFTs, the court didn't see much difference between that and physical process servicing in a lawsuit, and therefore allowed an NFT to serve as good service of process to bring somebody in court. Now, granted, this was tracking down somebody who was a hacker and had stolen cryptocurrency, but nonetheless, they were able to serve that person's wallet, which left some information available, and the court said that was good service. Now, ultimately, I'm sure they'll take a default judgment, but one of the challenges you have in a lot of hacking situations is trying to track down the person in order to get good service. In this case, I think they've recovered a lot of the assets and they wanted the court to allow a forfeiture of those assets. So by serving them, they allowed to get that process going. But, a lot of our current clients, as you know, Amy, represent content owners and companies in the music, art, and consumer products world. And they have, numerous IP issues. They've obviously all spent a lot of time, energy, and effort over the years to develop significant IP portfolios, including patents and trademarks and copyrights and such. And so they, I think, have a specific interest in wanting to understand how they can create and monetize this portfolio further through the use of tokens. And so perhaps you could dive in and give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yes, it's very true. We get that question a lot. We often advise someone who might be thinking about minting or using an NFT to exploit some of their content that they either own, or they might be wanting to use an NFT in a manner that uses somebody else's creative content. For example, if you want to create or sell an NFT that uses somebody else's trademarks or trade dress, it's important to ensure that the brand owner has licensed that use. If there's any confusion regarding the source of that NFT based on the use of a third-party brand, there could be a risk of infringement. So there's been recent cases over unauthorized use of Nike shoe images, for example, as well as Hermes brand bags. The Birkin, there was a baby Birkin that was created by one NFT and some Meta Birkins for the metaverse. And that's created some novel questions about the intersection between digital assets and the real world objects. NFT mentors argue, for example, that their product is just a code and that it's not using trademarks in an infringing manner. On the other hand, brand owners argue that their rights extend to digital images beyond the mere products that are associated with the brand. So this is raising a lot of novel questions, and then some traditional questions about what is considered a fair use of another person's intellectual property based on how they're using it, and if it's used in a way that's not confusing but more artistic. Another issue that often comes up, especially with collectibles like sports cards, is whether the right to publicity is violated by using an athlete's image, for example. The right to publicity is governed by state law, so it's important to understand what that right is in the resident states of whoever's image is being used. Even if an athlete authorizes an image within an NFT, there could be some concern about other branding that might be associated with that athlete. For example, team uniforms that they might be wearing, trademarks, logos, or other insignia that are associated with their team or school if they're a college athlete. There could also be copyright rights in the photo that's chosen for that NFT. So whoever took the photograph is considered the author from a copyright perspective of that photograph. So that brings us to the host of other copyright issues that typically come up with NFTs. Any video, music, artwork, literary work, blueprints, and even software code is entitled to copyright protection. The copyright owner is usually the author of those works unless there's an agreement that says something else. So if the sale of an NFT grants the buyer access to works that are protected by copyright, then it has to be cleared by the copyright owner. Also, the NFT buyer should be aware that just because they purchased the NFT with copyrightable content, it doesn't now mean that they own those underlying copyrighted works. There must be a specific written assignment of the copyrights in those works for them to pass to the buyer of the content. So that's really important to understand.
You know, Amy, you raise a lot of valuable points. And it seems to me in my 30 years of practicing intellectual property law that really the same rights that have applied before the advent of tokens are really the same rights and considerations that you would use when dealing in the digital and token world. In fact, a number of years ago, it's got to be 15, 20 years ago, I had a federal case of infringement involving a horse jockey. And the question was whether that person was recognizable based on the silks they wore. And that was being used in advertising where his face might have been blurred, but the silks became known. And, you know, the court had a solution for that based on what the current law is. And so when you apply all of those types of copyright and trademark law and rights of publicity and so forth to the token world, it does seem to me that a lot of those same concepts freely transfer over into the token world. So if our clients are wondering, you know, what additional kinds of steps they're going to have to take in the protection of their intellectual property, now there are certainly going to be differences in the monitoring of potential infringements and watch services and those kinds of issues if they're so inclined. But it seems to me that the underlying types of protection that they've gotten through traditional trademark and copyright registrations and so forth will be applicable to protect them in this new era of non-fungible tokens.
Sure, there's definitely a lot to consider. And there's, to the extent that the IP owner, the ones that are actually authorized to exploit the use of their content and intellectual property, to the extent that they want to monetize their own works, there's numerous ways that an NFT can be used. There's actually been a surge of new ways to sell content using NFTs, especially in the music business. Many artists and copyright owners are structuring their labels and distribution deals in a way that includes NFTs. For example, artists and labels such as Snoop Dogg, Timbaland, Universal Music, they're all launching these virtual bands and labels based on NFTs. Universal has even brought in an NFT manager for one of its NFT bands. So this concept of a virtual band isn't new. Gorillaz is an example of a band that's been around since the 90s, and it includes animated representation of vocal generation software that anyone can use. Rights owners can now essentially use NFTs to buy and sell this type of digital technology. NFTs can also be used to sell album art in connection with music. And this, along with VIP rewards and other benefits, has created some new ways that artists can monetize their creativity as well as engage their fans. I went to a recent Music Biz conference in Nashville and learned about many new NFT projects on the horizon. And these could expose new artists and help them interact with fans and help really engage in their social media. Some other ideas included one-on-one fan meetings, interviews with artists, as well as royalty sharing for music streams among NFT buyers. While some critics debate the value of such offerings, others have shown increased revenues outside of that traditional touring and merch. So even though the value is kind of uncertain, it seems like there might be a lot of opportunity there to create new revenue streams that are outside of where they've traditionally seen some of the revenues in the music business.
It's interesting to comment. We were speaking about NFTs before this podcast, and I've been reading quite a bit recently that there's a lot of now new questions being raised in the art community in particular about the energy consumption, which we've all heard about with Bitcoin, that it takes this huge amount of power to run these search farms that regulate and mine various data. And so there's been some pushback in the art world where, the average transaction takes a household of a few seconds, 2 days worth of power. I read another story where somebody had a 2-piece art collection that was equivalent of 2 years of power of their studio. So people are starting to question some of that power consumption. And I think, much like any other industry, as it evolves, they'll find more efficient ways to power and mine this data that will bring down costs and digital greenhouse footprints tremendously. But I think, in the meantime, there is certainly another avenue to exploit for our client in their assets. And, this is sort of a new horizon of things that people have to explore. I think the good news is that it doesn't sound like you have to do a lot of additional legal work in order to begin exploiting your imagery and music and so forth. It's really just understanding what the opportunities are and how they would work within the non-fungible token world. So maybe you can bottom line it, Amy. We could go on talking about this all day, but at the end of the day, as a buyer and seller of NFT, what is really the buyer getting, if that makes sense?
Right. I really think it depends on what the NFT represents. There are so many different art collectors, sport fanatics, music fans, and others that really value that connection with the content creators that an NFT might represent. So ownership of an NFT might give them that connection or feel a sense of purpose in with the artists or other sports that they enjoy. So critics, on the other hand, might say that the NFT market is very uncertain, and what may be valued one day as a high price could be worthless the next. The NFT is only worth as much as what someone else is willing to pay for it. So would you want to buy something that's $69 million to learn, a few months down the road it's not worth anything? However, the same question can be asked of anyone making an investment in an uncertain product. The only difference from other types of investments is that those traditional investments have more technical and economic value indicators, whereas the NFT price is based primarily on demand. So whatever consumers are going to value it at is what is going to be the demand. So it's important to do the research, really understand the risk involved, check out with your financial advisor, which is out of my wheelhouse, and then, choose those things that you really value and, want to benefit from to the degree that it supports the artists and the copyright and content owners that are putting out these products.
Well, I think that, you've given us a lot to think about here. Clearly, your attorneys and us and here at Williams Mullen can really be of assistance to make sure that your IP house is in order, that you have the necessary copyright and trademark and other kinds of registrations and considerations of your portfolio, taking into account also patent and trade secret and other types of activities to make sure that your portfolio is game ready and ready to go in this new environment. And so I would think that our advice would be, as a first step, to go ahead and make sure you have those assets properly cataloged and understood and what the parameters of your protection are. We can certainly be of assistance in that. This discussion has been short, but I think we're really at the front end of a really large frontier of business activity that's going to continue to expand into not only art and music, but other types of media, financial, industrial, and other types of manufacturing and so forth, where we are just now starting to see the benefits of non-fungible tokens, such as even in the court system, using it for process service. So I want to thank you, Amy, for your valuable insights today. And I think that we'll wrap up here with our discussion of understanding and economizing of NFTs and creative content. I'd like to thank Amy for joining me today on Trending Now and IP Podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact us. You can also visit our intellectual property practice page at williamsmullen.com/IP, and there you can find out more about our team, other episodes that we've done in podcasts, and other legal alerts. And we'd ask that you subscribe to the podcast to be notified when the next episode posts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, thanks so much.